after chapter upon chapter of Job and his friends arguing back and forth about the way the world works and the nature of God's justice, the conversation is brought to a screeching halt by the intervention, actually, of God himself, who comes down in a whirlwind, or at least the voice comes from a whirlwind, ostensibly to resolve the dispute. Does God resolve the dispute?
Well, in a way he does, but he sure doesn't do it directly.
Yeah.
Because at no point does he take up Job's complaint.
Right.
And at no point in these speeches does he admit what actually happened.
Right.
What had actually got the thing going. Instead, what he says is, who the hell are you?
Yeah.
You know, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? So it's a straight power play of grinding Job down into his place.
Yep.
And Job's response will be, oops, sorry, I repent in dust and ashes. Well, he's reduced to dust and ashes,
Right.
practically.
I mean, but what does he have to repent of, really? He's repenting not of anything that brought about his unhappiness in the first place, right? His friends wanted him to repent the whole time.
Yeah.
Because he must have done something wrong.
Yeah.
And in the end, he does repent. But what he repents of is having even tried to figure out whether or not he should repent.
You know, having the audacity to complain. But it's really just submission to raw power. And you see, that is in fact what Job had predicted early in the book. He said that if he were to answer me, well, I couldn't defend myself. You know, he has all the cards. Now, at the same time, God, goes through an awful lot of the stuff that Job couldn't possibly know.
Right.
Who shut up the sea in its womb? Who entered the storehouses of the snow? And then there's some great stuff about the calving of wild goats and the mountain, the wild ox, and eventually he'll trot out Behemoth and Leviathan.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things though, that comes across from this is that it isn't all about us. It's not, the universe isn't created necessarily for human beings.
Yeah, it's an interesting it's an interesting contrast, I think, certainly to many of the typical sort of creation accounts that you get, Genesis 1 or even certainly Genesis 2, where really it is created for humans. And it's also by appealing to some of these natural phenomena, it's also a rebuke, another kind of rebuke of the traditional wisdom approach, right? Which is look around and see how nature works, and you'll understand. And this is saying you have no idea how nature works, right? You don't know how any of it, and and this is obviously true, right? What we think of as sort of knowable things, like how calves come, like how calves come to be, and how the weather works. Today, those are known things for us, but even for them to have speculated, right? Job says this is well beyond any of your knowledge. The whole wisdom system is a bit silly.
So does God owe Job an answer?
As readers, we so want it, right? We so want that kind of resolution. But the point of the book, I think, in many ways, is God doesn't owe Job anything, right? Job at the beginning of the book seems like an important figure because he's the central character, and because God and Satan happen to dispute about him. But it turned out in the end, I don't think that Job mattered that much to God. There's other guys. He's not. We are not individually or collectively. God's not thinking about us all the time.
Right. Now, let's look then at the conclusion of the book. After the Lord had spoken these words to Job, the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, "My wrath is kindled against you and against your two friends, for you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has." Now, first of all, has God any reason to be angry at the friends? These poor guys were racking their brains trying to defend God.
If the standpoint of the book is that conventional wisdom sort of thing isn't true, then yeah, I think so. One of the aspects of the position of the friends is if righteous behavior results in reward and bad behavior results in punishment, God's hands are tied. Right? God is constrained to respond in a certain way. And I don't think the God of Job, I don't think the God that speaks in the whirlwind is okay with any kinds of constraints on action.
Well, then if you come back to the question that Bildad asked, does God pervert justice? Now, Bildad said, of course not. And Job said, well, he does. If it isn't he who is doing it, who's doing it? And justice does get perverted. Now, at the end, then God says to the friends, Job was right. Job spoke what was right about me, and you didn't.
Yeah. And I wonder if that's, to me, I wonder whether it's about the perversion of justice or whether simply the idea that there is such a thing.
Yeah. Which in a way is more devastating.
Right. I think, and I think this is, what's so interesting is, again, the book is premised on the notion at the beginning that God actually was rewarding Job for his righteousness.
Yeah.
Right? Job, at the beginning of the book, is a perfectly righteous and perfectly rewarded person. And then it's all taken away on a whim. Was there justice at the beginning? Certainly by the end, I think it's fairly clear that the category is wrong.
Yeah.
Right? The category implies that God is super concerned with what we're doing.
Does justice demand that people be rewarded or punished in accordance with what they have done? That, I think, is the common assumption. And I think the book is saying it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. The individualism of it, I think, is off.
Yeah. Now, at the end of the book, then, altogether, the Lord restored the fortunes of Job when he had prayed for his friends. And the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. And there came to him all his brothers and sisters that we've never heard of before. And they all ate bread with him and showed him sympathy and comfort. And they each gave him a piece of money and a gold ring. And the Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than the beginning.
He gets a new family.
Does the old system, is the idea that God rewards the righteous then vindicated in the end?
So it's hard, I think it's very hard for present day readers not to find this problematic almost to the degree of being satirical. Right? The notion that by replacing everything, including his wife and children, that everything is okay. Yeah. I think that there's a large swath of interpretation, of history of interpretation that very much takes it that way. This is wonderful, right? This is the confirmation. My sense is that the author of Job actually is a little bit poking fun at this as a potential solution, right? It was sad about your family. Here's a new one. I'm sure you'll grow to like them.
Or when all these brothers and sisters appear with their piece of money and a gold ring. But if you were Job, what would you say?
Where were you?
Exactly.
Where were you?
Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? But where were you?
Like just 2 days ago, right?
Yeah.
It's a funny book in that nobody comes off well.
Right.
Job doesn't really come off well. At the very most, Job's Job's righteousness doesn't equate to likability, and in the end, his position is one of just massive self-abnegation. His friends, for sure, are dislikable and condemned by God. Satan is dislikable. God is dislikable. His family, the brothers and sisters. Who's the hero? Of the book of Job.
Actually, is God likable?
No, not at, this is, yeah, I don't think even slightly.
Not a comfortable God to be around. This
But-
is not a consoling God, let's
Right.
say.
I mean, if you're going to talk about the wrathful God of the Old Testament, I mean, we generally think of the stories from the earlier in the Bible, but this is probably the least sympathetic, in part because at least the wrathful God, there's a sense of the wrath is deserved.
And he cares
Right.
what's happening on earth. Whereas this God, when Job was trying to do everything he could to please him, and the devil, Satan, dares God to test him, he says, sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just keep him alive, because otherwise we won't get the results of the experiment.
Yeah.
But everything else is expendable. Should Job learn anything from this whole experience?
Yes, but not sure. He does learn something. I mean, he's the one who gets it at the end, right? And actually, as you said, he got it even at the beginning, right? He knew from the get-go that this was not a winnable fight.
Yeah.
And I think what he learned at the end is that's certainly confirmed.
Yeah.
But not only is it not a winnable fight, but really, I shouldn't have been fighting in the first place.
It seems to me that what Job should have learned from it is that he wasn't nearly as important as he thought he was.
Right.
And of course Job stands for all of us.
Exactly right. I mean, that's the whole
Yeah.
premise of that divine speech is
Yeah.
Of both of them, right? Is the one that says, look, I'm busy with other things, right? First of all,
Yeah.
and then to the friends, none of you know what you're talking about. Just stop speaking. Stop speaking for me, right?
Yeah.
Which actually I think is a really very useful, eternal kind of lesson.
Yes, and one that is eternally ignored.
Right. Yeah. It's there's for all of its popularity, I think that actually that lesson of Job is not often enough sort of taken from the book, right? Everybody wants to talk about why did bad things happen to good people,
Yeah.
and that's obviously one of the central things that is talked about. But much of the answer is don't think you can find an answer to that.
Yeah.
There's an inaccessibility of wisdom and of knowing God's ways that, for me at least, is the most resonant part of the book.
Yeah.
It is also not only about how we talk about God, but it's how we talk to other people about God, right? And that's why God's rebuke of the friends I find to be such a satisfying moment. It's not necessarily about you were wrong and Job was right, but just the notion that you thought you could represent me.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, obviously, this is a put down of a lot of traditional wisdom, of which the friends are primarily exponents. Now, looking at it within the context of the Hebrew Bible as a whole, there's another line of Robert Frost, when God comes back, he says to Job, "You realize by now the part you played to stultify the Deuteronomist." Now, the Deuteronomist, who was operating with the covenantal model of history, that you keep the law, you'll be rewarded, you break the law, you'll be punished. Does he indeed stultify the Deuteronomist?
Oh, I think not just the Deuteronomist.
Indeed.
I think Job is whether intended or not, and I think probably not. I don't think Job was written to sort of be in debate with any of the other biblical books directly.
Right. Yeah.
But it feels like such a sort of philosophically, I don't know, advanced is the wrong word, but it is thinking about how we know what we know in a way that almost none of the rest of the Bible does.
Yeah.
And its answer is, which is, not only do we not know we not only do not know things, we don't know how we don't know them. Really, it's a response to the whole of the Bible. Once you've read Job, it's very difficult to go back to any of the other books and read them as anything but overly self-assured,
Yeah.
right, in their knowledge.
it's a great book, I think, to discuss at the end of a course on the Hebrew Bible, or on the Bible as a whole.
Right, and I certainly think it is a meta commentary, and it's a mature, reflective. How we know what we know should be at the center of just about every conversation to do with the Bible or just about anything else.